Sam Smith. I'm a Master of Business Analytics student here at MIT Sloan, and it's an honor to introduce Shelley Pissarra and Thomas Matthew, who will be taking us through the precarious business of driving growth through audience understanding. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Very precarious indeed. Sorry guys, running about 30 minutes behind here, so we'll hustle to try and get everybody back on track. Hopefully I have a couple good key takeaways from here. I'm Shelley Pissarra. I head up research and insights at Wasserman Media Group. I am 2 years into the sports side of the space after 20-some on the CPG side. I'll keep the actual number to myself and my close elementary school friends, I guess. And what I like to specialize in is kind of picking up capabilities and seeing where we can transfer them across businesses, across industries, and so on. And that was the opportunity I saw coming from a lot of time on the CPG side in advancing capabilities and skills in analytics, and now swinging over to the sports side and really applying some of those and trying to think how our partners think. And I'm privileged to be joined by my partner in crime here, Thomas.
Hi everyone, Thomas Matthew. I'm excited to share the stage with Shelley today. I've been building data products for a long time, 20 years for the financial and healthcare sector. Like Shelley, the most recent 3 years has been a focus on sports analytics, working with partners like Wasserman, as well as teams and leagues across a variety of different sports spectrum. And really excited to be here and talk about the opportunity from an audience perspective on how you can get more insight into helping brands.
Yeah, and we make kind of a good dynamic duo. I come up with crazy ideas, and Thomas keeps me honest to make sure the numbers stack up and we can do it. So from a Wasserman perspective, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with us. You may know us on the talent side. We represent athletes all over the world, but I'd say it's a privilege to work for a global company that works with the world's best properties, brands, and talent globally. We have a footprint in now multiple countries around the world, 13 offices. We're about to open one in Shanghai. 800 folks on the books from an employee standpoint. And really what gives us confidence and what we're really respected for is the amount of experience we have in this space with 20 plus years and then collective years on top of that with all of our great experienced leaders. But if you look at that last number and $1 billion in transactions and deals and things that we've been a part of, that's a lot to draw on. And what's really cool is what we'll talk to you about today. At the end of the day, that's all fantastic, but if we don't know who we're targeting and who we're going after, it can kind of be for naught. So we'll dig into that for you.
And Zoom has been around since 2011 as a skunkworks project. We actually launched publicly at the MIT Sloan conference back in 2013 in what is called the Blitz for startups. So it's really exciting to be here 5 years later. And our focus and our mission is about how we can foster audience understanding for brands at a big data scale using signals from the digital space. So we started working with Wasserman back in 2014, and it's been an exciting journey for us, starting with the social campaign side and building beyond that.
And what's really great about our partnership, just to kind of give you the evolution of how we landed on building a product together, was as we started that work in 14 and 15, really pushing into answering questions about social performance and focusing on social measurement, you know, the thing that kept happening was folks asking us more about the audience behind the numbers. And if we're going out and we're trying to gather impressions and engagements through our activation efforts, who's behind that? And what do we do with that information? So we needed a partner that could really help us go deep on that audience understanding, and then we really needed to think long and hard about application. And that's where kind of the two companies coming together made a whole lot of sense, is so that we could then think about what our clients need, again, brands, properties, and talent around the globe, and know that we had a great data partner that could give us a lot of the who, and then we start to set the context for the what, the why, and the where. So that's really where the relationship was born, and it really sits on a foundation that Zoom provides for us.
Yeah, our core data foundation on which Unlock is layered on is an engine that processes billions of social signals on a monthly basis. And leveraging an engine that gets into language processing and graph analysis, we're able to assess and enrich that data across essentially data points and audience behavioral aspects that provide a lot of meaning to raise up into like a sports business focused application like Unlock.
Yeah. So from that, Unlock was born, and then there's two specific products we're going to walk you through today within that Unlock platform. The first one's called Unlock Profiler, which lives up to its name. It's all about profiling those audiences. And the second one is called Unlock Match. And that's really about helping to identify best fit partnerships. And really, again, looking at the application side, the data is great, but if we can't apply it and solve problems for our clients, it's not necessarily that helpful to them. So we'll dig into some examples for you there.
So at the root problem, we're in an age of digital distraction right now. And at the time the slide has been up, you can get a sense of how much content is being created organically, but also being consumed as well. And the challenge for brands today is how do you create compelling content that's going to stand out amongst all this digital noise? And it all boils down to two things, which is trying to assess context in terms of relevance, but also in terms of timeliness, in terms of the right time to push up content. And that was one question that came up in the last session about how the NFL can time the cadence of content being pushed out. It all comes down to those two factors bringing together to create those compelling moments.
Mm-hmm. And really what that leads us to is to really focus on truth. If we were going to understand who that audience is, who those people are behind those great big impressions numbers, and really understand what they care about, it kind of comes down to truth. And this is a fundamental principle that has lived forever, well beyond any of us in time. But it's good to come back to it and to think about where am I really rooted? And in today's time and age of distraction, as Thomas pointed out, it's never been more important to tell the truth. And to do that, you need to start with understanding the truth behind the consumer or the fan that you're talking to, and then find the right fit for brands and give them that forum to tell the truth to the brand. So this is a quote that's been out there for a bit from the Vice President of Optum, but it kind of regrounds us as we think about making sure we're honing in on what the real opportunity is.
So at the root, we're now in this shifting phase. We're moving from an information age to a digital age. And audience understanding has to move past that. We are no longer have to be dependent on click-based tracking or pixel-based tracking to assess what people really care about. It now gets down to really focusing on people and understanding outside of the spectrum of your brand, what do people, not just about a team per se, but outside of that spectrum, what do they care in terms of interests, beliefs, values, opinions, affinities to other brands, et cetera, and building that rich picture. And the power that story tells is now, from a perspective of a chief marketing officer today, you can now create frictionless content that resonates with your audience. You can create anticipatory moments for that audience, and all together drives up retention, drives up brand loyalty, drives up upsell opportunities, and at a scale never possible before.
That's right. So let's talk about how it works. Let me give you a couple of examples of Unlock in action. So this is our Unlock Profiler dashboard, one of the dashboards. And we did some work with GoDaddy earlier last year on their audience and their targeting, and really understanding if they're going to find growth, they're going to compete in the world of Squarespace and others who are out there. They really need to not only understand who's engaged with them today, but that target audience that they want to go after. So there's two cool features of Profiler. I find them cool, but I guess that's our job, is to find them cool. Is one, we can really go deep on your audience today and help you understand that. And you can see a few statistics about that audience as it exists now. Basics about them, what the active follower counts are, active versus passive, so how engaged are they, some of their interests and demos and such. But we knew we needed to go deeper, and we knew we needed to take information in from other sources and then go out and find this group they wanted to drive growth with. So the work that GoDaddy did behind the scenes was a lot of brand health work, a consumer segmentation study to say, these are the types of people I think we'll find growth with. Now, tell me what they look like in the social space, tell me what they care about, help me better understand their interests. I have stated research about them. Now you go find me the rich understanding of how they live their lives day to day. So then we were able to create their target audience, which you see across the bottom of the screen, and that was honing in on knowing they were targeted with millennials, they were likely tech savvy, well, pretty much had to be tech savvy in this case. They were likely going through life changes. This was actually a pretty big eye-opening factor within this. They're looking for jobs. They're maybe leaving a corporate job to start their own business. They might be doing a business on the side. and or they're just experimenting and frankly communicating out in the social space and they wanted a web presence. Finally, being a music lover and urban. And after we did that, we went out, created that custom audience, which is one of the great things the tool allows us to do. Then it pulls back all that richness in terms of what these folks care about, how they're living their lives, interests, affinities, and then where we could start hunting for GoDaddy to connect with them. That then led us here.
So leading to what Shelley just talked about of that persona definition of that ideal consumer profile for GoDaddy, which taps into all these 5 dimensions, and building that audience, understanding the footprint of that audience across a variety of different behavioral and brand relationships. The power then becomes, from a match perspective, on how you can overlay that audience definition down to the person level and compare and contrast it with influencers and brands and properties and a lot of other ways to kind of assess who provides the best potential to reach that target group. And the power of the Match product is essentially constructing active and passive audiences on those core, like for example, Miley Cyrus, for example, and then layering it on top of that persona, and you can see the match results out here. And a kind of like shift in terms of what GoDaddy's prior focus in terms of a very sports-centric aspect of who they are, but now showing that there's an opportunity to step beyond that and get into other aspects in terms of music and esports as well to grow their audience in that new micro group.
Yeah, and the cool part about this is, and you all know, they've used the NFL as a platform for years with respect to really focusing on Super Bowl and then other support throughout the year. But as they understood this audience, they realized, okay, well, we'll keep that there and think about that as a platform, but what do we put on that platform? And that's where you look at a Miley, you look at esports, and someone like a Steve Aoki who invests in esports and kind of bridges that gap with music. Now I have content, even if I want to go back and use this platform, I'm still meeting a quarter of my audience's interest, but I have a lot more richer territory here to engage with my audience at almost a third in each of these other sectors. These are interests and passions they didn't understand about them before, and with the tool we can get down to the brand level, to the location level, to the understanding of the exact content that people would be most interested in. So this gave them a great jumping off point, a great opportunity to start to lay out a new portfolio of plans. So next we'll move on to the Raiders. I know there's NFL talk before this, and now we're going to talk about the Raiders here. Well, obviously we all know the Raiders are getting ready to move to Las Vegas, so they had a big challenge in front of them. And this is another application of Profiler coming in and helping us better understand the audiences at hand. So they needed to cultivate an entire new fan base in Vegas, and then they also needed to create a compelling proposition for sponsors. Right, so from our perspective, we're trying to marry brands and properties together in a wonderful relationship that's mutually beneficial to each other, and that can come in compatibility today or opportunity tomorrow. So with those two challenges in mind, we set out saying we really need to understand the fan base that they're going after. We need to understand the diehards they already have, kind of in the can that have been with them in Oakland, and LA before that, and back to Oakland, and now in Vegas. That fan base, rabid, you all know all about it, and they've been with them a long time. But then there were two distinct fan bases they needed to care about as they approach into Vegas. One is that local fan base. You have to support this team day in and day out. There's a venue being built. How do we think about that? Who are the partners we care about? Who's going to drive revenue for us beyond the 8, 10, 12 home games that we might have a year, depending on playoffs? And then finally, that tourist group, which everybody gets real fascinated with. Well, just worry about the tourists. The casinos will buy everything. You know, don't stress about it. So we had to take a real deep dive into these three groups, and this is what we found.
Yeah, and the key aspect about getting to this point is the complexity of the segmentation to target these very unique sections of their fan base. And the hardcore fans will be people who have engaged with the Raiders historically. And as you can see with the profile analysis, there was over-indexing in terms of what they care about, an alignment to mainstream US sports interests, for example. And on the Las Vegas local side, it gets into aspects of how you can target and weed out the tourists, but you want to focus on people who either self-identify to be in Las Vegas or who have strong social connections to maybe civic organizations in Las Vegas, let's say City of Las Vegas or Las Vegas Police Department, a lot of things that are very localized. And once you define that audience, you can assess what stands out against an overall baseline and see what the outliers are. And interestingly, a lot of the businesses on the Strip actually stood out. And in retrospect, a lot of people who are Las Vegas locals actually are employed by businesses on the Strip, and gives a lot of reasoning behind why that data stood out. And the third part would be the Las Vegas tourist community, and that was essentially isolated based on the fact that their geographic footprint is so dispersed. I mean, they might be in Vegas for a weekend, but most of their time would be spent in locations, maybe LA, maybe Miami, et cetera. And in terms of that definition running through the profiler showed an indexing in terms of music interest, specifically in terms of the DJ scene in Vegas as well. So here you have three distinct fan groups with all very unique characteristics that they care about at the top line. But the powerful story comes in terms of getting to that lowest common denominator so that the Raiders could run essentially one targeted campaign to reach all these three segments rather than having unique campaigns against all three. And then the interest that stood out at that level was essentially music and gaming for that population. So that allowed a more direct focus in terms of how they could engage with influencers and other brand partners to reach them.
Mm-hmm. And the fun part about that was, as we layered the audiences together, you start to see the interests peel off, and you really focus on what those last couple of things are. So I think even within hip hop, within music, the top genre here was hip hop. So that gave us a tremendous amount of opportunity. And then within gaming, it was very specific, them gaming and an interest in esports. So then that starts to open up a whole new conversation in terms of activation. And this is where we like to start to have some fun. And this is on the agency side. We like to build a strategy. We like to build a plan to start to bring this to life. So one of the things we had told the Raiders and we had talked about was, think about bringing this all together as you kick off your season and you kind of come into your own. And that could start with fan festivals that not only honor the locals and obviously reflect in the way that they're executed that diehard fan base and what they care about, but it gives a destination for, as part of a weekend away for the tourists to come in and enjoy that. And that's music, and potentially connected to that, it could be an all-stars, gaming contest in a partnership with ESL. Whether or not they end up going deep into the esports space, that could have many, many legs to it. But there's a nice way to actually start to connect these things from an activation, communication, and honestly, a sustainable program standpoint. And then finally, the last piece, and we didn't pull for this specifically, but this kind of ties back to entertainment. So this last one was Shelley Motors. We took a bit of a leap. But one of the biggest challenges in defining their value proposition is going to be, who are my local partners? Beyond the casinos, beyond the restaurants and things that people know about nationally, who are my local partners that mean that Las Vegas is home? In Oakland and the Bay Area, they had plenty of partners and plenty of local partners. They still do, and they're very valuable and very wonderful, but that's part of being a hometown team. So the thing we thought about here is Shelley Motors, tied to all of this. If there are big events out, big nights out, big festivals you have, it's a nice play to bring in a local partner with a big name that definitely is something that folks coming in visiting Vegas take a look at when they're really interested in high-end automobiles. But could you tie in some sort of a service with that and really carve out a space for Shelley Motors to be one of the pinnacle premier local partners? So that's a bit of a leap and an add-in there at the end, but this helps to illustrate how you can start to tie these things together and develop a sustainable program when at the end of the day it's really about that audience truth and knowing what these fans ultimately care about. And in this particular case, we were able to take those three fan bases, drill it down to their two primary objectives, and then start to structure something around that. And with that, we're ready for questions. I can't say anything. Oh, I guess you're supposed to wait for the mic. I forgot to say that.
Yeah, please raise your hand if you have questions, and wait for the mic.
Anything? No? Sure.
Okay.
She can. So a couple things. One of the things
I was just asked about measuring success based on all the criteria they set up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the answer because I could hear you. So a couple of things we're doing. I mean, we have a really rigorous measurement approach at Wasserman in general, full cross-channel measurement. But with respect to measuring success all of the way through. The great thing is once we've identified this audience, we can actually monitor the size and shape and engagement of that audience and follow them all of the way through the activation. So Zoom is a partner with us day in and day out on social measurement, social listening, social understanding. But typically there's a lot more to this than just the social activation. So we'll look at employing our full cross-channel measurement to make sure we're covering all of the channels and measuring back the performance against the key core objectives. But that will come in audience growth in the shape of who they want to appeal to.
And just to add to that, in terms of like the Raiders example, after the shift, you can actually evaluate those 3 segments and actually seeing, are you attracting the Las Vegas local community in like the post-shift audience, and seeing if that is a measurable movement that can assess success of the campaign.
Cool, thank you. Nothing else, thanks.
Thank you so much.